Welcome to Leaders Recon, where we discuss leadership, warrior skills, and other unique opportunities within the G3 Leader Development Branch. I'm your host, Joshua Carr, and today we're going to be discussing the spirit of competition within the Army National Guard with Lieutenant Colonel Brian Deaton and Staff Sergeant Friedlein. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So I know, sir, you've had a ton of experience both as an enlisted soldier in the active component and then as an officer now, but battalion commander at the Warrior Training Center, and then Sergeant Friedlein, you've won multiple competitions as the Best Warrior competition and the Best Ranger competition here in 2016. So, I guess before we get into the nuts and bolts of the spirit of competition and some of these, more philosophical discussion, what is a fun, unusual fact about you, sir?
So I've used my powers of persuasion as a commander to influence my wife, actually, to join me in three-gun competitions in our civilian life. So okay. I've done three-gun competitions now for a couple of years, and I've gotten her involved. And we just recently, she shot her first multi-day three-gun competition with me, the HESCO Armored Zombie Apocalypse Invitational in West Virginia. So we both did very well, and very proud of her for finishing 2 days of a patrol three-gun competition, killing zombies in West Virginia.
So what I want to know, you said invitational, so how do I get invited to a zombie three-gun competition?
I can't tell you. It's by invite only. So.
Okay, so Sergeant Friedlein, what about you?
I guess being in the National Guard, I've had the opportunity to compete in the Best Warrior competition and the Best Ranger competition, been successful in those. I also have a wife. We've got 2 kids with another one on the way, so been busy.
Well, congrats on that. Now, talking about you competed in the Best Warrior or Best Ranger competition, you mentioned in 2016. You actually won that competition, correct?
Yes, Major Robert Killian and I, we were partners that year, and we were the first National Guard team to win the competition in its 33-year history at that time.
It's a pretty impressive feat.
Yeah, thank you.
And sir, when you competed in competition, was that, you mentioned you were an enlisted soldier previously. Were you active duty military when you competed, or were you on the Guard side, or how did that?
I was. So I was active duty military as a staff sergeant. At the time, a Ranger instructor in the Florida phase of Ranger School down at Eglin Air Force Base. So I had the same partner 2 years in a row. In '98, we finished 9th as a team in our rookie year, and we finished 2nd in 1999. The first loser, if you will, chasing those Colt pistols.
So speaking of that, the after you spent some time as an enlisted soldier, you converted to the Guard, and then you went on to command the Warrior Training Center, right? Which kind of, they host the train up for the National Guard soldiers to do.
They did. So I've actually commanded at 2 levels at the Warrior Training Center. I was the Alpha Company Commander, which does the Rating Training Assessment course, in 2009 through 2011. And it's actually during my tenure as Alpha Company Commander that we began the Army National Guard Best Ranger selection and train-up period.
Okay.
That later produced the winner in 2016, and many other great finishes from other teams. And then I was able to have the fortunate luck to come back as a battalion commander in 2017 through 19, and was able to kind of see the next level of competitive preparation that the Warrior Training Center now does for Army National Guard soldiers for all types of competitions across the Army.
So speaking of that competition mindset, like you competed, you helped run programs to train people to compete, and then the same thing with you, Sergeant Friedlein. Like, what is it that drives the mindset, the competitive mindset behind individuals as they're getting ready to prepare to enter a competition? You know what I mean? Like, what is the driving mindset there? I know that we see competition between branches, right? It's like go Army, beat Navy. You have the friendly competition that occurs between even your specialties within the Army. I guess we see that all over. What are some of those factors that drive that competition from your perspective? Now as the Chief of Leader Development.
Well, actually, I'd defer to Sergeant Friedlein as a more recent competitor in the Best Ranger competition and others. I'd defer to him.
I'd say, like we talked about in the other podcast, there is an individual drive to be better, to try, again, be more lethal, that readiness level. But then at these competitions, you are an individual, but you're representing more. Like when we won for Best Ranger, we were representing the Army National Guard. When I competed at the NCO of the Year, it was NCO of the Year representing the Army National Guard. So that's where you get that esprit de corps, that pride in your organization. And you realize you have a lot of people rooting for you, looking up to you, looking for you to do well, because you hopefully will shine that organization in a good light. Like for Best Ranger, we helped show like, hey, we're competing against active duty units. We have to be on the same level as them. We're not just weekend warriors. There are National Guard soldiers trying to get on the same level to maintain that lethality readiness. Same thing with the Best Warrior competitions. We're just trying to show that the Guard is capable of doing the same things, and trying to get rid of that mindset of the weekend warrior.
So, and I would agree with that. I mean, and speaking from my days competing for Best Ranger, and then later on the personal side in triathlons and other competitive sports, you have a personal drive, but that quickly for success, and you want that accolade or that honor, but that quickly fades into the what you've called the spirit of competition, where the camaraderie you build amongst the competitors, even though you are each trying to outdo the next, that competitive spirit across that brotherhood or sisterhood of competitors actually makes it even more rewarding there. And then as you go on, that relationship you've built with either your active component counterparts or others in the community, and another relationship you've built to bridge those gaps.
So you brought up a really good point about like the collective, sir, and that's one thing. I know you were a Ranger instructor for a while, and then we've all been to Ranger school. For me, like I feel like I experienced a big shift when like RAP week I felt like was all about me as an individual. Like, could I meet task condition standards for whatever the events were? And then as soon as we turned over into Darby and the beginning of Ranger School, it became all about the team and all about the squad, like spirit of cooperation. And I guess from your perspective on this, how do you start to balance, you have this competitive spirit, right? But then also like the cooperative effort that is required to make a cohesive team. So
I would explain this similar to how we established the Best Ranger Train-Up program at the Warrior Training Center for the Army Guard. So when you bring high-performing Ranger qualified soldiers together, and I know we're talking a lot about the Best Ranger competition, but the Warrior Training Center and the Army Guard writ large competes in multiple different events, including the Best Scout Squad, which is the Gainey Cup, the Sullivan Cup, which gives the Best Tank Crew, and there are others. But you initially have to identify individual skills and capabilities, so that competition for selection is very individualistic. But after those competitors and those are selected, we start forming the team. So you start building that camaraderie between competitors, and then as it moves forward into that competition itself, you still have that individual competitive nature, but as you have a shared sacrifice, a shared experience that's both physically and mentally challenging, you find that you start building the bonds of camaraderie even amongst your fellow competitors, and that translates directly into military team development writ large. Shared experiences with shared hardships for soldiers in the unit create that camaraderie bond that even though everyone in the unit wants to be the best they can, they're looking out for the collective betterment of the organization.
And then, yeah, have you experienced some of that, Sergeant Friedlein? I know that you're working right now. You help with some of the Ranger training programs that your state runs. Have you seen some of those, like the shared experiences that Colonel Deaton is talking about, how that helps bring that sense of camaraderie?
Definitely, I'll give you an example from the All Army Best Warrior competition. Competitors are off on their own schedule doing different events, but we all come back to a staging area. I came back to a staging area and I saw one of the competitors, a good friend, Staff Sergeant Emery, was actually teaching his competition how to do a range card, because that particular individual didn't know how to do a range card. So he could have kept his mouth shut and, had the advantage, this guy not getting any points, but he actually took the time to start helping. And then as we started coming in and sitting down next and overhearing what's going on, everyone else started chiming in things. So just like Colonel Deaton said, even though we're competing against each other, there still is that the sacrifice we're making, we're all going through it together. We developed a bond and we helped each other out, even in the middle of the competition. For the RSAP, the Ranger Sapper Assessment Program that we run in Pennsylvania, same thing. We bring everybody in and we're creating an order of merit list. So everyone is competing against each other, but they still end up developing that bond, going through that SOC together, that they start working together. And as they work together, they actually elevate each other's performance. So it's what we're looking for. We need that individual drive, but then that willingness to be a team player.
So that goes into my next question, which was focused on like the spirit of competition within military units as a whole. So outside of the individual competitions and stuff, we have this competitive drive between branches, between specialties, between units, between companies, platoons, whatever. What do you think? Why do you think that is, that we have developed this, fostered this spirit of competition amongst each other, and why is it important to the unit?
Well, as a former commander, I would say that every commander is encouraged to find some sort of productive, competitive event or inspired friendly competition between organizations or between small units under his or her command, because that elevates the capabilities and capacities of everyone. If it's always great to be called the best platoon leader or the best squad leader in the organization, but the reality is that by creating that competitive spirit, you cause everyone to want to be better, and you create this sense of camaraderie amongst all those organizations while they're bettering themselves, which increases unit readiness, and the spirit of competition is what really drives that.
What about you, Sergeant Friedlein? Have you experienced that in some of your units right now?
I would say, pulling from the Best Warrior competition, when it was over, we went to the AUSA conference here in DC, and we got to meet a lot of the command structure of the different MACOMs, and there is a lot of competition. There's always competition between the National Guard active component, but even within the active component, there is a lot of pride in the different MACOMs. So just like Colonel Dean was saying, if they want to be the best, and in doing so, they up their game, basically. Like the National Guard, when we trained for Best Ranger, like Colonel Dean said, they started a program to help make us more successful. So that upped our training, upped our game. Ranger Regiment on posts, all we were doing, they stepped up their game, that sort of thing. There's the constant, it is the battle to be the best, but in doing so, all you're doing is forcing everyone else to step up their game. So as a whole, the collective, everybody gets better with this drive to be the best.
And to add on to that is that once you create that competitive spirit, and you will recognize those that have more capacity or capability or are the best, those people actually develop the skills to teach their subordinates and their peers, similar to what Sergeant Friedlein talked about his experience during the Best Warrior competition. My experience with those that are at the top of their game want everyone else to be at the top of the game with them, and they're willing to take the time and effort to ensure that they pass along all the lessons they've learned through competition to their peers and subordinates that have not had that opportunity yet. So even though competition and an individual's participation in that competition may seem selfish on the surface, the outcome is that those lessons learned, that experience is actually spread throughout the force. So that goes back to the best Ranger competition or the best tank crew and the Sullivan Cup. Anecdotally, I can tell you, having been involved with the train up for the Sullivan Cup, which the Army Guard won also, I think, in 2016, that tank crew's battalion once they returned, their gunnery scores across the organization increased exponentially the next 2 years, because that tank crew was able to share all of the lessons they learned during the competition and the train up for that competition and spread that knowledge. And I think if you look back at all of the organizations that have invested the time with their soldiers to allow them to pursue these competitions, that you would find that same level of organizational improvement across the board when they returned to the organization and shared those experiences, shared those lessons learned, and motivated that next generation of competitors to perpetuate that greatness.
Well, and that goes right into what something you said, sir, goes into something that Sergeant Friedlein and I were talking about earlier, related to the motivation behind why he was, competed for the best warrior competition, right? And how it was, really motivated by wanting to be the best soldier he could be, versus not, like, obviously you want to win, but like it wasn't solely motivated by this, I just want to win this competition. It was motivated by this, sense to just be the best you could be at whatever your tasks were that were given you. And I feel like that goes in back to exactly what you're saying, sir, about building, readiness essentially within your units by using these subject matter experts.
Absolutely.
Like in our state, the Ranger Sapper Assessment Program, it was put together by First Sergeant Troy Conrad, who has been a competitor and has done well for the National Guard. So he took his experience from that, also his experience from being in Ranger Regiment, but used that to create this program to, again, share that wealth, to have PA Guardsmen at least more successful at Ranger School. Because before then they were just having a very, very hard time getting Ranger graduates. Now, First Sergeant Conrad bringing that knowledge, again, like I said, it helps spread it.
So then that brings me to my next question, which was on like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators, right? Like we know that some people are motivated intrinsically, internally by, various factors, and then there's, external motivators as well. What do you think that it is that motivates, soldiers to compete? I know you've hit on some of these things already a little bit, but what are some of those intrinsic and external factors?
Well, I think the extrinsic, the external factors are the opportunity, the potential to be recognized for your accomplishments, right? So that's probably on the surface, that's probably everyone's example of, well, I want to be named the best Ranger. I want to be, part of the best tank crew or the best scout squad in the Army. But after you start that journey, I think I said this earlier, after you start the journey down the path of competing in these types of events, and there are others across the Army, then you start to internalize what it means to make yourself better. You start to see and learn all the things you didn't have an opportunity to experience previously, and it's like, oh, I can apply this back in my organization as a squad leader, as a platoon leader, and then as an organizational leader, as a commander, either company command or as a battalion commander. What I can tell you is that I encourage my soldiers to go out and compete in these types of competitions, because I knew that over time the what some would call selfish motivation to go do this was actually an investment in them as a development tool, and then it would come back and it would pay dividends back in the organization, either by motivating others to also acquire that competitive drive, or by sharing of experiences that would inform them and further develop the organization at large.
So in hitting on that, sir, again, just following down that same line of thinking, when you were a Ranger instructor, did you see some of that play out with the Ranger students? So, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are just like, I just want to go get my Ranger tab, right? But I feel like at some point in the course when it really sucks, like that is not a motivator enough to keep you in a course anymore. Did you see some of that with your Ranger student classes as they came through, or what?
Certainly. So I had the benefit of being an instructor in the final phase of Ranger School. So what I saw as an instructor was, by and large, a cohesive team at the platoon level, and typically down to the squad and team level, that had been forged over nearly 60 days prior of individual embracing the suck as an individual, but then creating the fact that, again, going back to everyone's experiencing the same emotional and physical hardship, it builds that camaraderie and that bond where you don't want to see your buddy fail. Now, Ranger School is not competitive in the sense that if I've got to succeed, or for me to succeed, you must not. It's actually everyone can succeed together. And going back to the examples that Sergeant Friedlein has shared, and I think I've mentioned a couple, in the end, the competitive spirit at any of these competitions results in the fact that I want to be the best and I want to succeed, but I want to make sure everyone's there at the finish line along with me, and so that it's a camaraderie that's created.
And you went much more recently, Sergeant Friedlein, to Ranger School. Piggybacking off of that, what do you think in your experiences there, throughout the phases, did you notice a shift within your platoon, or from, that competitive get through rap week and make the cut to the focus on the team as a whole?
I'd say definitely, like you had mentioned, sir, rap week, it was very individual. We had those task and standards. Nobody really knew each other yet. Nobody worked together. Everybody was sucking, and they did whatever they could to keep the cadre's eyes off them. And they were very, I guess you'd say, selfish or more individual driven. And once you got past rap week and realized that, like Colonel Deaton said, I need you to get a go with me to help me get my go, is when all the teamwork started and the bonding, and realizing you had to work together. For everybody had to have that mindset of working together to complete the mission and be successful. We had up in Pennsylvania for the RSAP program, we had the first female enlisted guardsman, Sergeant Farber, graduate Ranger School, and that was kind of the mindset we were trying to drive into her, is that this is not an individual, this is not a statement for you. You're not here just to prove that a female can do what a male can do. Like, we need you to understand the purpose of Ranger School, and that by going to Ranger School, it's this leadership school that you are going to learn truths about yourself, so you have empathy and help lead your soldiers. So that's what we're trying to drive home, that it's got to be the mindset, not that individual mindset, but that collective mindset that everyone needs to better each other.
So to kind of piggyback on what he just said, it made me think of a point that I think is critical, is that when you go through these difficult competitions, regardless of the type, you're going to be tested to a limit you may not have recognized before, and you'll see yourself go beyond that. So as you learn your own limits, and the fact that you're breaking what you thought were your own limits, it allows you to more accurately understand and meter how you lead, and how far you can push your soldiers to be better themselves. Because as a former competitor, you will look back and say, well, my limit, I thought my limit was right here, and I've broken through that 3 or 4 times over, and I was just like every other soldier. So you can know your own personal limitations, and that's what Ranger School helps you do as a leader, is learn those. But you refine those through different competitions, and you can apply that back to your leadership ability in the unit.
Well, and I mean, I understand that firsthand, sir, because I remember going into Ranger School, and they would always tell you these stories, about like just no sleep and stuff. And honestly, I thought most of them were like huge exaggerations coming into it. I was like, yeah, you don't get 30 minutes of sleep and go the next day. Like, that's not a thing that actually happens. Like, someone's pulling. And then I kept a good journal, and sure enough, first phase of mountains was rough for my platoon. And I was charting, and I was like, man, we slept 15 minutes last night and like 45 tonight, and here we are on day 3. I was like, if you asked me before this, I would have said, yeah, that's not possible. Right. So I feel like it, like you said, it changes your perspective on like what's realistic and what's not realistic.
Absolutely.
So going in then and asking sir about, and Sergeant Friedlein, going in and asking about like operationalizing this. So we've talked a little bit about the competitions and like building the competitive mindset and building that mindset of cooperation amongst the teams. Once you've gone back to your units and the organizations that are going to be doing their jobs within the military, what's your advice to leaders for like kind of balancing, this act of building, competitiveness and unifying it into cooperation to create a cohesive team?
So at the battalion level and maybe even at the company level, as a commander, what I would recommend is that you have to establish that culture of competition, but not to the point where people believe they have to outdo the other to succeed. It's not a zero-sum game. So the competitive competition culture is such that you ensure everyone that works for you understands that you expect them to be their best and you want them to be their best, but at the same time, they're not being evaluated against one another. And we've had this conversation in counseling. So I told you up front, my philosophy on evaluating people is that make them their best. But I'm not comparing this person against this one lieutenant, this one platoon leader against the other one. I'm evaluating them based off of the high standards that the Army has set forth for what a leader should do. And if you clearly articulate that as a climate and culture of competition, to be better, not to be better than your next door platoon, then I think that's one way to set the tone to foster that sort of competitive spirit. And I think down at the company level, in the platoons, that it's a little bit different.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming you were a squad leader at some point. How did you do that in your squad?
In the squad with an M-Day unit, it was at first I was hit with a wall almost. Like not everybody shared the same base motivation that I did. And that was something that I had to really work through, dealing with National Guard soldiers. And right now I'm helping, I'm a PSG or Shadow Platoon Sergeant for a unit back out on the line right now, along with teaching ALC. And it's the same thing, running into this mindset that not everybody has it. So have to find a way to try to get people to develop the mindset that yes, you're in the National Guard, still says U.S. Army on your chest though. So trying to create friendly, competitive events, just regular training tasks, but throw a clock on it and have different squads or different teams compete against each other to see who can, get through all the task unit standards for that event first sort of thing, or who does it more correctly. Just trying to create competitive events in all the training events instead of it just being a training event. I'm dragging off. I don't know how to bring this back on.
I can elaborate on, I think, what he's saying and kind of the so what of it from my perspective as a battalion commander. So if you create these events where you're driving everyone to their limits or finding out what their motivations are, and maybe those that don't have the same motivations that you do as a leader, that does something for you as a leader. It informs you about what your soldiers, what drives them, what motivates them, which then allows you to apply empathetic leadership as you run the organization objectively, but you have to lead at the direct level empathetically. You have to be able to, you must be able to translate the commander's vision or the mission at hand into a message that is understandable from that soldier's point of view. And so by driving competition at the individual level, at the squad, you start learning about your soldiers, what motivates them, where they believe their limits are, and having competed yourself previously, you know how to coach and mentor that soldier to go beyond their limits that they have established for themselves mentally, and that's through that empathetic leadership, which is derived from understanding what the soldiers can do based off the competitive spirit you employ in the squad. Does that help?
That does, sir.
Okay.
I mean, that brought up a really good point you were talking about like, what I got from that was you were saying like, you're creating the competitive environment to evaluate essentially the capabilities of whatever the unit is, but you're also on the back end, you're also learning about the priorities, I guess, in some respects of like the individual soldiers within that unit.
Sure.
How does how have you used that? How have you used that, and how has that changed as you went up? Like, because you were an enlisted soldier first, and then an officer, all along. Like you've done like every job there is in the military almost.
So my approach to leadership has definitely changed over the years. So when I was a staff sergeant in the 82nd and then as a Ranger instructor, it was very. I expected everyone to meet my expectations of what a Ranger or an infantryman or a paratrooper or a soldier was, and I drove my soldiers to try to emulate that. Looking back, it was not necessarily always it was not always the best approach, depending on the soldier at hand. My thinking on that has matured over the years, obviously, where I've realized as I become a company commander, and honestly, it wasn't until I had my opportunity to have a second company command that I started to clearly see this, that the objective standard you can hold for the organization is a goal you can establish for everyone, and some soldiers will meet that goal, whatever height you have, of their own accord, because they're motivated similarly to how you are. There are other soldiers who, as Sergeant Friedlein said, have different motivations or do not value that motivation that you have, and so you have to learn how to approach them to provide that purpose, direction, motivation that leaders are supposed to do. And so I think at the platoon level and below, that direct leadership in creating a competitive environment, or spirit, I should say, not in the environment, a competitive spirit amongst your crew or your squad or your platoon, allows you to influence and learn about each soldier and how to make them better as you go along. At the level I'm at now, as a former battalion commander, that becomes more difficult, because now I'm trying to I'm trying to help company commanders understand the same thing I just articulated and apply that to their next level. But each of those company commanders is differently motivated as well. So each permutation of what I just explained from my perspective is applied differently at every company, which is not a bad thing. It creates that diversity of thought in an organization that you really want to find out or want to have and foster. So that's the other thing, as we tease out what the spirit of competition really means, I think we can kind of find out that actually can lead to understanding the diversity of your organization as you go along.
Well, and that leads into another question I had for both of you, because I know you're AGR soldier now, but you spent time as an M-Day soldier in the majority of the forces, and so the military is kind of this unique environment, right? You have this sense of camaraderie and brotherhood within the military that doesn't exist in a lot of civilian workplaces to the same degree. What is how does this spirit of competition that we've been talking about and the spirit of cooperation that's coming out of that help translate to the civilian world for soldiers that are serving in a traditional status?
First stab at this.
I would say, well, like most anything, what you learn in the military or in the Army, you learn your job-specific skills, but then you also learn as squad leaders or team leaders or even officers, you learn how to manage people. And I think you can take that, what you've learned in how to manage people, and you can apply it to most any civilian job. Like you're not going to necessarily fire, an M4 in a civilian job, but working with people and getting them to achieve, like Colonel Deaton said, like a goal, an organizational goal. I think you learn that when you compete, you refine your ability to do that, and so you can take that and apply it when you get out to a civilian side.
I would agree with that. And I was going to say the very same thing, that when you compete or you create a environment that's or climate that encourages competition, it allows you to learn how to coach, teach, and mentor. So you learn how to coach yourself or coach others through competition, and mentor that person or persons to become better. I think that's directly translatable to civilian employment anywhere you go.
So we've talked a little bit about the spirit of competition and cooperation, with Ranger School, with, regular military environment, those two things are, by their very nature, opposing forces, right? Like the competitive spirit versus the cooperative spirit, but yet the military's managed to, mash those two things together to create a high functioning environment. How does that work within the military, and why is it so effective?
You want to talk at the platoon level, company level?
Say, well, most of the competitions that the Army does run, they're usually never individual. Like Best Ranger competition, you're with a buddy. The Gainey Cup, it's a whole squad, Sullivan 10 crews. So I think that those competitions are, yes, they're competitive, but they're training you to work together and be cooperative, like you're saying. For like the Best Warrior competition, yes, it is individual, but even at the All Army stage, the first phase of it, it was, we were actually all together as an element doing a patrol together. So it forced us to work together and cooperate together to even get to, the other individual events. So I don't, and like I mentioned earlier, even if you have one organization competing against another organization, all that's doing is forcing each other to work harder to be better eventually. So it's that, iron sharpens iron sort of thing. So I don't think that the competitions are designed to make people only think of individualistic goals. I think it does force, it is individual competition, but it forces the cooperation you're talking about by everybody having to work together to get better. So like even in myself, I had the backing of my command help train me. Other people were involved in training me to make me be successful at the competitions. Same thing with Best Ranger. You have so many resources pulled to help make these people better. And in doing so, it opens eyes to either training pitfalls or resource request things for the organization itself. So everybody is learning from it. Even when you do fail, you've learned from that failure. So I do wholly believe that the competitions do breed excellence and cooperation.
Well, and sir, do you want to kind of add on that, but talk a little bit about the mindset piece of it internally?
Sure. So I would argue that the idea that the competition and cooperative spirit are opposing forces is probably incorrect, for the fact that you build a team through shared experiences. And shared experiences that are, I think I've said this before, emotionally or physically demanding, are some of the most, they produce some of the best outcomes, some of the best lessons learned. And if you have a group of people that are competing against each other, teams or not, they had that same shared experience, and over time they leave behind that self-interest to a degree, and they want to see everyone succeed through this difficult task. It's quite honestly, it detracts from the spirit of competition if you get to the finish line and there are very few left. Mm-hmm. You're proud of yourself for being one of the ones that finished, obviously, but at the same time, you feel like maybe you could have done more for those that were going through it to help them go through, which Sergeant Friedlein alluded to earlier in some of his anecdotes.
You hit on a really good point there, sir. And Sergeant Friedlein, both on like how the military competitions are focused a lot of times on team success, right? And like even if it is an individual competition, I mean, I can't think of a time where I ran some sort of military race and we didn't run back to go find people that were farther behind the race than you and run up with them, right? And so, what is it within the United States Army that creates this environment, this team cohesion environment that really doesn't exist in a lot of, civilian marketplaces?
So it's something I'll start with this. It's something you've heard me say before. The Army is a team sport, and you come into the Army as an individual, and the part of the outcomes of initial entry training is to inculcate you into the Army culture and instill the Army values. So if that's successful, then you become part of the Army team. And whether you are a military police officer or an infantryman or a cook, it's irrelevant. You're still part of the Army team. And you may go into a competition as an individual and be from a different background, a different experience in the military lifestyle, but in the end, you're all part of that same team. And that sort of, you have a shared identity, you have a shared experience through the competition itself, which is unique to that group. So the Marines like to say they're the few, the proud. They keep a very small force, and they're all Marines. The Army is quite a large organization comparatively, and so we have what from an outside looks like a bunch of different specialties. You have an airborne unit here, or a Ranger unit there, or tankers there, which from the outside again looks very cliquish, and there is some competition in between the different branches. But it's all friendly competition meant to make the other better. So while I may come from a different background, a different experience, when you create a shared set of experience, you build that next team together. So that's what competitions kind of do. They actually span the different backgrounds and experiences across the Army and the Guard, all components. They span those experiences and bring a collective group of individuals or individual teams together and give them another shared experience, which also allows you to understand better your competitor, or the soldier, the different team to your left and your right. So I think that the competitive spirit that we're talking about here is really a part of a continuum of Army service, and that in the end it actually creates a much stronger whole force as opposed to just a better individual.
Well, and you hit on something, sir, that reminded me of what Sergeant Friedlein said earlier in the interview, related to Ranger School, which is the one thing that I can relate with here, a little bit, and that is, like, you need those people around you, so it doesn't matter if I can get a go on every patrol. If the rest of the team can't get a go, then we're not going to be successful. And to me, that's to me, like, what stood out to me, and with what you just said, is like, as soon as, when I went through Ranger School, they told you if you had to go or not. It's probably not the case when you went through, sir, but
I went through before you were born, so.
But I felt like, for us, it motivated the team, because we knew who was passing, and who wasn't passing, and like, it motivated the team, like, okay, we got to get this guy his go, like, he's up now, like, and it became like a team-based effort. I don't know if you experienced any of that when you were going through that program. Or...
When I went to Ranger School, no, they weren't telling us whether or not we would go or not. We had holdovers who were very, they knew how to translate what the RIs told you, so they would tell you if you were go or not. But there was some clear-cut cases where people knew if they weren't, and we did that very thing where, hey, we got to really help this guy. Like, team leaders stepped up to really help them get to go. I think, like with the competitions themselves, they're all designed to showcase our lethality. So our goal should be to try to have as many people be successful in the competition, because, like, if I'm the only one, like, if we use Best Ranger, for example, if our team is the only one across the finish line who made it all the way through, like, to me, it doesn't make me feel confident in the Army as a whole. Like, I would want more people to be able to finish it, to showcase, like, hey, as a force, we are very capable. And I think that's the way most of the competitions are designed. Like, you want to know that we have a very lethal force.
That's a really good point. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming today and sharing some of your unique experiences related both to competition and, like, from the leader development side as well.
Hey, thanks for having us. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's always great.
If you would like more information on any of the topics discussed today, please visit us at our social media pages in the links below. Tune in to Leaders Recon over the next few weeks as we bring in today's leaders and pioneers to discuss their experiences, share their wisdom, and help you grow as a leader. We will also be announcing opportunities for you to sharpen your skills and expand your toolbox as a member in today's Army National Guard. See you next time. If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe below and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.